And one of the problems with being like an analytical, up in your head type person is that that ability to be really analytical and to use like that part of your brain, it doesn't actually help you very much with social interactions. In fact, it can be really detrimental to be up in your head when you're talking to someone. So what do I kind of mean by that? I'm sitting here literally talking to a piece of plastic with some circuitry and a little hole, which is the webcam, and I'm not consciously thinking about what I'm about to say before I say it. It's just kind of flowing out of me because I've drank a bunch of coffee and I'm trying to prove a point right now. So, do you think I would be able to sit here and talk about this stuff if ahead of time I was thinking, oh, should I talk about that? Maybe it's better to talk about this, and I'm like all up in my head as I'm trying to talk to you, which, you know, is a webcam. So that's a big part of the problem, is that when you're an overly analytical person and you tend to use that as your tool for solving every problem in life, analyzing it, I suspect you've already come to learn is that social interaction is one arena where that's not always a big advantage, and it can actually be a huge deficit. So there's a couple things I want to touch on. So number one, let's talk about your beliefs or values. So in my situation, when I was younger, I've always had kind of a big ego. I've always known that I'm not stupid. I've never thought of myself as a genius, and I still don't, but I know I'm not stupid. I'm smarter than average. I don't say that in an arrogant way. I say that in a very objective way. What I used to do then is I would say, okay, well, the reason why most of these people, the more social type of people who seem to do well in social interactions, the reason why they don't understand me, or I can't connect with them so well, is because I'm too smart for them. Wrong. I'm tempted to yell, but I'm not going to. But that is really a dumb belief if you hold that belief. Let me explain why it's stupid. So if you use your intellect as a shield for your insecurity and your frustration in communicating with people, that is what I call sneering nerd syndrome. That belief set or that attitude is making the situation worse for you. So I want you to drop that attitude entirely. Every time it pops into your head, I want you to treat it like just some nonsense that has no value whatsoever. Why do I say that? You can't look at person A, who's really good at talking to people, and person B, who's really good at solving problems, and then say one person is better than the other. You simply can't. One person is smarter than the other. Why can't I say that? Well, I'm sorry, but I don't actually care if you're amazingly good at solving math problems if you can't string a fucking sentence together. So what I would say is to don't value your whole self-esteem and your whole character based on how good you are at one particular intelligence. And social intelligence is a form of intelligence, which you are probably lacking in. I was severely lacking in social intelligence as a kid. I still struggle with it sometimes. It's something I work on all the time. So that's the first thing. Drop the attitude, there's something wrong with me that's causing this problem. There's something wrong with other people that's causing this miscommunication. It's not your fault that you suck at communicating with people, and it's not other people's faults that they're not interested in talking to you about something other than like Drake and pumpkin spice lattes and all the really boring stuff that most people talk about all the time. No one's at fault here. That's just the way the world is. So with that identified, I want you to just jettison that whole attitude if you came from that. I call that sneering nerd syndrome. I used to be a sneering nerd, and it's just a very unattractive quality for a person to have, to like be like, oh, I'm going to use my intellect as a shield and I'm going to try and tear you down. You know, you don't understand me because you're just not smart enough. Actually, no. It's very 50-50. If you can't articulate yourself in a way which makes sense to most people, I would consider that to be your deficiency, not a deficiency for the other people. Why is that important? That means, okay, so we're not blaming anyone, but we're being realistic about the situation. I, or you possibly, this was me speaking from my perspective from a few years ago, I have a deficiency in social intelligence. As a skill set, I'm not great at that in many different situations. Cool. Oddly enough, I've always been good at public speaking. That's one which I don't understand. I've always been good at public speaking, yet extreme introvert. Bizarre. What you need to do is you need to treat your social intelligence as something you can practice, and you need to look at it objectively and be able to say, okay, I'm not very good at doing this particular type of thing. I need to figure out a way to practice this particular skill set. So in my case, simultaneously one of the worst and best experiences of my life was working as a suit salesman. It's a long story, but just at 17 years old, I moved into a new city away from my family, and I needed a job right away, and the first job that I got was as a suit salesman in a upper-end clothing store. Very bizarre. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't know how to talk to people very well, but there are just reasons that I ended up in this particular job. So over the next 4 years, from like 17 to 21, I got to practice my ability to talk to random rich assholes, basically. I practiced that skill for like 4 years. When I started that job for the first 2 years, it felt awful. I was very incongruent and robotic, and I just had like no ability to just freely express myself and to be able to, when someone walks into the store, to just be like, hey, welcome to, oh, I almost said the name of the store, but welcome to so-and-so. Are you okay just having a browse? Or, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Take a look around. If you get any questions, just let us know. We're just right over here. So the important lessons and skills that I developed working as a suits salesman really revolve around just a lot of self-reflection and a lot of practice. So in terms of the practice, like I say, it was literally my job to talk to people like all day, all kinds of different people. So in a sense, I actually basically created an enormous database of reference experiences. And so that is something which has really changed my life, because ever after that, when you meet so many people, like hundreds of people a week, you get to see patterns in people, much like I see patterns in code and software development. You get to see patterns in personality types, and you kind of get this subconscious ability to understand where people are coming from in a sort of a non-analytical way. It's just like a background. Okay, I've dealt with your type of person before. I know what to do that will make you happy, what to do that will make you upset, how to approach this situation. So part of my way out of dealing with my social anxiety and my frustrations in meeting new people and dealing with new people is, you know, a lot of it just came from not knowing, from being like, oh, is this person going to be mean to me? Whereas after a while, I could tell pretty quickly what people were going to have a propensity towards being mean and rude to me. And I would basically just ignore those people and treat them about the same. And also working as a salesman, you get a thicker skin. You stop giving a shit what people call you, because people will say horrible things to retail workers, horrible things to sales people and waiting staff, hospitality staff. I kind of joke about this with people that, so some countries have mandatory military service. A lot of countries do, South Korea, Switzerland. You have to join the military for 1 or 2 years. Well, I think in like North America and Canada, what we should do is we should make mandatory retail service experience. So for a year, you must work in a retail setting and deal with all of the insane, mean, demented people that retail workers deal with every day. Because there's value in understanding why people are like that. The people who are meanest to me, I realized, like, you know, these are people who go through life making problems for themselves all of the time. So in a sense, even if I like lose the argument or whatever, these people have convinced themselves that the best way to go through life is to be mean to people, and that is a curse that these people don't even understand. Anyways, I'm going all over the place. What the hell am I talking about here? Let's get to the practical stuff. So, if you are a person who has a lot of frustration with social situations, you need to do 2 things. So you need to try and either get rid of, which is generally impossible. So I would actually suggest you try to integrate your self-perceptions about your difficulties with communicating with people. What does that mean? It means going through your insecurities. So I used to have this insecurity or this self-belief about myself. I'm a robot. I'm wired differently than other human beings. Social interaction is not for me. I am not allowed to do that. I was not given that capability at birth. Try to find things like that you tell yourself, and then think about them deeply and understand that they're wrong. That is just a self-perception. It's not the truth. It's not a fundamental defining characteristic. And I would like to invite the idea that you don't actually know yourself that well enough to say that you are born without the ability to communicate with other human beings. So even if you're not an emotional person, that's okay. So that's the first thing. Like, identify your particular insecurities. If you would like, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but feel free to even like message me about this stuff, because this is a problem that I've dealt with a lot. And if you have particular insecurities, I can probably explain how to deal with them, because I probably went through them. So that's the first half of it. And then the second half is you need to, in a sense, make it your job somehow to talk to people every day, probably new people. Just like you spend all your time programming to get good at programming, you need to just carve out like a year of your life, or 3 months at least of your life, to put yourself in a situation you really won't enjoy and just practice talking to people, practice meeting all kinds of different people. If you do that, I guarantee you it will suck. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's gonna suck. I hated like every minute of that job. But you will thank yourself so much. Like, I'm so proud of myself that I went through some of the shit that people said to me as a salesperson, you know, if those people said that to my face now, I would just punch them in the face. Like, remember this, I'll tell you a quick story. This is the stuff you'll deal with when you deal with the public. So I was working in the clothing store, and we had this shelf full of these beautiful sweaters. They're, I'll actually say the brand name, William Lockey. They're Scottish sweaters. They're knitted by like Scottish grannies. They're made in Scotland. They're beautiful sweaters. I sound like I'm trying to sell them to you. And these 2 older gentlemen came in, and they were, so I think I'm sure I said hello to them, but I picked up pretty quickly that I don't think they even said hello back, even though they knew I said it. But you know, I'm a rich old asshole, so I don't have to be nice to service workers. That's okay. So you go over to this stack of nice sweaters, this shelf of beautifully folded sweaters. And I know they are beautifully folded because I folded them, and I'm really good at folding things. So they go over, and they just start pulling them down and kind of making a big, huge mess. So when people do this, I normally get a little closer, and I kind of stare at them a little bit. Not super aggressively, but it's kind of like, I'm going to make them feel a little bit, you know, I'm going to make it obvious, like, what you're doing isn't really cool. So they kind of pull one stack down. And then one of them says to me, would you mind finding me a large? I can't remember what size it was. A large in this color. So I thought, oh, okay. I'm thinking in my head like, oh, okay. So you do want my help. Oh, you know, big surprise there. You don't know what you're looking for. So I go over, I say absolutely, and I go over and pull out the size he's looking for. And as I'm handing this sweater to this guy, he looks at me and he says, "Some people are born to serve." I tell you, it's one of those situations where I wish I was in that situation later on in my development when I wasn't a shy and sensitive 18-year-old, because I would have had some ways of responding to that situation which I've developed over the years. But at the time, I was so blown away with what a horrible thing to say to another human being that just helped you, that I couldn't even respond to it. So I wanted to tell that little story just to emphasize, like, a lot of people, well, I won't go there, but I want to tell that story to emphasize that whether you are male, female, or whatever your background is, if you're young or old, if you work in retail, you will find someone who will be a piece of shit to you and will talk to you like you're less than a human being. There is value in getting to know people like that. Not at a personal level, just recognizing that there are human beings out there who are so horrible that they will say shit to you like that for no reason, even if you help them. So those are the kinds of reference experiences which you will get if you put practice into interacting with people. Don't walk into this expecting every interaction to go well. That doesn't actually occur for anyone. No one, even the most social and charismatic person you've ever met, has had plenty of awkward and horrible social interactions. So don't just, don't delude yourself in thinking that this is a problem that's unique to you. And that's basically all the advice I have for you. Try to mitigate and reframe your insecurities if you have them, and put yourself in situations where you practice the skill at hand, which is, in this particular case, social interactions. Just like you want to get good at programming, practice programming. If you want to get good at boxing, you spend a lot of time boxing. If you want to get good at, whatever interior design, spend a lot of time doing interior design. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying if you have a skill you want to get good at, which is how I think you should frame social acuity, then you need to practice it with something that is specific to the skill. So that's it. Hopefully that rambling was useful. Peace out.